I am in Monon, Indiana at the Monon Connection Museum and the Whistle Stop Restaurant. This is one of the lesser known railroad museums here in the country, but it is actually supposed to be really amazing, so I'm really excited to come check this out. This big thing was used on the Monon line. It says Ulidic on there, so I wonder if this was used in the bedrock quarry regions of the state. So this is a combination museum and restaurant, both railroad themed. So that sounds pretty good to me. So go ahead inside. There's an old Coca-Cola sign. It's very faded at this point. Here's a British telephone booth. Most of these that you see around are all gutted out, but it looks like this has the original telephone and the original signage from Britain. First thing I noticed when entering was the big G-scale model railroad up by the ceiling. So there are constantly model trains passing overhead.
They just signed their name to it. We have numerous ticket bunches. And I've had mine on the
The first room of the museum is filled with railroad memorabilia, primarily lanterns, railcar silverware, and other accessories. Lots of fancy dining car silver from a variety of railroads. Dining in a railcar is quite an experience. Here's some 1924 china from the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railroad. They have a lot of switchman's lanterns, which are used to signal at night between trains and stations. Among the lanterns is this rather lavish cash register. They sure don't make them like they used to. There's a Pullman car conductor's cap. Some cool Northwestern theme plates from a Northwest line. These are artifacts from the Florida Flyer, which could take you from Chicago to Jacksonville in 36 hours. While much of the stuff here is related to the Monon route, there are pieces from all sorts of different railroads. This place has entire cabinets filled with whistles, keys, spoons, timepieces, nameplates, and much, much more. The nameplates that were on railroad workers' hats were made of metal. This is an extremely rare Louisville and Nashville Railway cast iron alligator. That is awesome. Here are matchboxes, locks, police badges. Man, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a little pamphlet you might have gone on train called From the Window. Bet that's interesting. There's some cutlery and vintage postcards from the Greenbrier in West Virginia, a very historic resort built by the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, and it's also home to the Congressional Bunkers. There's some Monon coasters and a Burlington Route cup and saucer. There's also a plate and some cups with a portrait of George Washington on them, as well as some cups with some colonial style silhouettes on them. No short supply of classic brass railroad bells in here. There are so many cases full of Monon Railroad relics. Really is incredible and overwhelming. I like these carved mini trains on railroad spikes. On the right is a golden spike from the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and on the left are some hobo nickels, where hobos took nickels and made carvings out of them. Some Monon rail line paraphernalia. There's a black and gold Monon coffee pot and an old-fashioned telephone. The museum walkthrough is largely a guided tour. The guide was great and really enthusiastic, and then you can walk around at your own pace. Ashtrays from a variety of railroads. You used to be able to smoke in certain designated cars. There's a newspaper article on the legend of Casey Jones, perhaps the most famous railroad engineer of all time, who was killed in a terrible train collision. This is the big room, filled to the brim with railroad artifacts and other antiques. The Monon Railroad, also known as the Hoosier Line, was established in 1897. The railroad went from Chicago to Indianapolis to Louisville, so it was called the Hoosier Line because it was primarily in Indiana. In 1967, the Monon route stopped passenger service, and eventually the freight line was merged into the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. The Monon symbol appears to be an M, but it's really supposed to symbolize two conjoined teepees, and along with the arrowhead it represents Indiana being the land of the Indians, even though they're mostly gone now, and the white circle around it means the line is in Indiana. I've gotta say, everything about this place is top-notch quality. There's some old fire alarm systems and other railroad relics. There's a phonograph.
Johnny Green, for the Ford machine, took his little trail for a ride all around, down the avenue, goodness how he flew.
Lots of vintage signage lining the walls. That's a tragic relic of segregation, a sign from the Louisville and Nashville Railroad for separate bathrooms. There's also a wood-carved Native American head. That's an Edison home phonograph, with some original phonograph cylinders, which had to be put into the phonograph for sound. The guide told me that the museum has purchased Henry Flagler's personal business rail car used in Florida. It used to be stored away at the Indiana Transportation Museum, which has closed, but the Monon Connection was able to buy it and is restoring it, hoping to have it on display in the near future. I am super excited for that and will return when it's on display. There's a Vandalia Railroad tunnel with a locomotive inside. There are also some railroad-related vehicles inside. Not actual rail cars because they probably wouldn't fit in here, but these are maintenance vehicles such as a rail aligner. Here's a railcar mover from the Milwaukee Road, which was the nickname for the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad. This is the original control switch for the Western Trolley. It was a funicular incline railway that was on Prospect Hill at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. It was originally built as a senior engineering project in 1908, but closed in 1949. It was the only incline railway ever in Michigan. Amid the railroad collectibles is this blunderbuss. Why not? Another elegant National Cash Register. This painting shows a Wabash College locomotive and a DePauw University locomotive in a roundhouse. These two Indiana colleges battle it out on the gridiron annually for the Monon Bell, an old 300-pound Monon locomotive bell. There's an old-fashioned megaphone to yell "all aboard." There's a replica baggage depot built into the museum, with some artifacts from real railroad depots. Here's some uniforms of railroad personnel. A model locomotive in front of the Emery station, which has a Railway Express agency inside. The inside of the depot is packed with real railroad station furnishings and antiques. There's the safe. By the way, the first ever train robbery happened near Seymour, Indiana by the Reno gang. Really cool to see what a railway agency office would look like back in the day. There's an old polling booth made by the Empire Voting Machine Company. I've never had curtains to vote, I wish that were more common today. And here's even more railroad signage. So, I am blown away with this collection, but that's not all. There's also a huge and highly detailed model railroad. This is representative of the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, evident by the mountainous terrain. It is probably the most elaborate and impressive model railroad set I've ever seen, and there are all sorts of hidden details mixed throughout it.
Digital command control. Well, this is straight DC because it's old.
Right.
But I have a hobby shop. It could come up to $25 or $30. My ultimate this can come up to $150, $200. If you get them started, then you can advance. But I said, don't quit making DC.
Right. You go buy a set here for $100. Train.
Another one there. There's another one there. There's two in the fire tower down there. See them? There's over 100 of them. In front of the elevator. There's two guys standing on the dam over there. There's men at the coal mine. There's men in there bathing in swimming suits. There's a guy fishing with his line going down the water. Not the levee water, the acrylic water.
Some kid. Some kid on the right.
Now, Willow Creek, the control board out of the upper floor of that tower is to the left, to my left, over there, that the man was operating using. This one is, this was kit built, whatever was kit back, and you know what I mean by that.
How many years did it take to get this out?
9 years. His wife was a hospital nurse, and when she was home, or she was working, he was home, he was in a. Now the way he had the high voltage wires running on the layout, they went into a wall, into infinity. And the guy that put this back. Right over here. Right in front of a scrapyard. Down in the end, did you see the people sitting on the dock there at that, right here? On the back side of that? They're just all over.
There's a hydroelectric dam. I also noticed this car crash holding up traffic.
But somebody at the lumber yard still blows lumber off pork truck. He didn't put detail on that thing. Did you find the horse that wandered off? Not where he's than they do when the lights are on.
The model railroad hamlet also goes into nighttime mode, which is super cool, all lit up.
There is a bench right over there. You seldom see on a HO layout. Larger scales you do sometimes. But over here, between the wall and the backdrop, through a hydroelectric dam so it looks like a big like this one. The backdrop, the owner's cousin came over and painted one Saturday afternoon, and he took his technique and used it for this, having never painted one. Now, if you've got some pictures you want, I'm going to turn the lights back closely.
And this is the Monon Connection Archives.
Because I get asked sometimes.
The guide showed me something extra they have stored in a back room, a large collection of miniature circus trains. Circuses would primarily travel by rail to transport the tents, animals, and performers from town to town. There's the Homo sapien projectile cannon. There's also mini circus carvings and scenes. Here's trainer Hans Gruber training some elephants. Here's all the circus performers and animal carts. There's also a golden shoe. This place is heaven on earth for any railroad buff. Now I'm going to eat at the Whistle Stop restaurant, which adjoins the museum. It is also filled with train memorabilia and the big G-scale railroad passes above, so several trains are always passing by while you eat. There's some old model train cars and vintage railroad calendars. I sat under the presidential seal. Presidents used to rely heavily on rail travel, and sometimes railroads would be named after presidents, like the Rock Island Railroad's Hoover Birthplace Special, which went to West Branch, Iowa, where the 31st president was born. Trains are literally passing overhead, and the food here is great. I love this place. There's still quite a bit outside to check out, including some actual railroad cars. You can see there's some old signage from the rail side. So it's a direction sign. Good little rail crossing. That one's wooden. The station-like building is the gift shop, but it is closed today. Sign for Terre Haute. There's an old Monon caboose. There's some old agricultural equipment on this old rail car. It's a Farmall tractor. There's a water tower. There's a Wabash caboose that you can go inside of. This one is fully restored. You can see the workers would actually sit up here in this elevated windows to see the views, see ahead of the track. Yeah, compared to most cabooses, this one is really well restored. Here's some old cars outside carrying freight. They do in fact have quite a few Monon cars. This place is just another example of the wonders that await us on the American roadside. You never expect something as amazing as this in this landscape here in the middle of nowhere. Now Now a little south of the museum, this is what downtown Monon, Indiana looks like. There's the old State Bank building right there. This mural says 1776. It looks like they have some White County history on there. And then Monon, Indiana was founded in 1879. That's a cool marquee for the old Monon Theater. Here's an old Carnegie Library building. Looks like it's still the Monon Public Library today. And here in town they have an old Monon caboose. Climbed up on the caboose platform. Not sure what this thing did. This is where the car could latch on. And there's the old railroad track. That's the inside of the caboose. There's an old illustration of Santa in there that was probably used for advertising. That's pretty cool. Here's a historical marker on the town of Monon, Indiana. A south line towards New Albany, Indiana, and a northern line that went through Indianapolis and Chicago. They both connected right over here, and that's what created the Monon route. So, the Monon Connection Museum is actually probably the best railroad museum I've ever been to. Still have a lot to get to, but this one is really well done, especially for a private collection. I highly recommend that you come out here to Monon, Indiana to see this. If you like this video, I have a bunch of other videos at museums and roadside attractions, on trains, and all sorts of stuff, so please check out my other videos, and thanks for watching.